So we've discussed cognitive development in a previous section, but what we know is that all facets of development are interrelated. So what are some of the cognitive changes going on in adolescence? Well, the main cognitive changes of adolescence are usually seen as intellectual improvements, but are they always advantageous? And if one of the main goals of adolescence is this search for identity, what do you think are some characteristics of adolescent thinking? So that's what we're going to talk about on this slide. The idea here is that during their search for an identity, adolescent thought becomes very self-oriented. And this is totally normal and developmentally appropriate. The self-absorption that marks the teenage search for identity is referred to as adolescent egocentrism. This is adolescents' ability to reflect on their own thoughts, combined with physical and psychological changes, really lead the adolescent to just think more about themselves. Some of the strongest stereotypes about adolescents are related to this new ability of metacognition, the ability to think about their own thinking. Alkind, a researcher, argues that metacognition induces a kind of egocentrism and intense preoccupation with the self. So this adolescent egocentrism basically contributes to the reason that adolescents are so self-conscious. I mean, think about yourself in adolescence and then think about yourself as a 7-year-old. If you were at a wedding, at which age would you be more likely to be the first one on the dance floor? Probably at age 7, because when you're in adolescence, you don't want to stand out and you think that everyone is watching you all the time. So let's talk more about this adolescent egocentrism. So imaginary audience contributes to adolescent egocentrism. The idea here is that adolescents believe that everyone else is as interested in they are as in... The idea is that they think everyone else is as interested in themselves as they are in themselves. And so they might take pains to either make sure that they're noticed, so trying to get a lot of attention, trying to be very visible, or making sure that they're not noticed. So the idea here is that they really do see that phrase, all the world's a stage, as true, but they think that they are the main actors and everyone else is the audience. So many adolescents feel that they are, in effect, actors whose performance is watched constantly by their peers. And this phenomenon is known as imaginary audience. Adolescent egocentrism, or that self-absorption, is also demonstrated by personal fable. And this is where teenagers' tendency to believe that their experiences and feelings are very unique, and that no one has ever felt or thought the same way they do. So here, kids see themselves as just totally unique. And these personal fables can cause adolescents actually basically to think, and I'm sure many of you maybe you've said this to your parents when you were in adolescence, but like maybe if you're in a relationship and you think, no one can understand how I feel about my significant other. Like, this is the truest, deepest love ever. Nobody could possibly understand it. That's this idea of personal fable. No one understands me. I'm just too special. The idea here, too, is that because they see themselves as so unique, they might also see themselves as invulnerable or invincible. So they might think that basic rules, like public safety rules, like speed limits, don't apply to them. That they're more skilled. Those speed limits are for the people who suck at driving, and they're good drivers. So what we see here is that adolescents might engage in a lot of unnecessary risk-taking behavior. So adolescents' belief in their uniqueness also contributes to an illusion of invulnerability, this belief that misfortune only happens to to other people. So personal fable can be very dangerous, especially when combined with this illusion of invulnerability. That it might result in risky driving behavior, especially if they're mixing alcohol in driving. You know, some individuals, they might say something like, well, you know, the legal limit for how much you can have in your bloodstream in terms of alcohol when you're driving only applies to other people. Like, I actually drive better when I've been drinking. You know, that's really not good. It could also result in risky sexual behavior. So researchers, what's interesting about this is that researchers have actually found it very difficult to document that all of these characteristics of thinking are actually specific to only adolescents. So maybe there's adults in your life who you know, who you're like, actually, I think that they might have some of these characteristics as well. So the behavioral aspects of adolescent egocentrism may actually persist throughout adulthood.